Imagine your only shelter, at nearly 7,000 meters, suddenly turning into a death trap. On April 28, 2018, a disaster unfolded on the slopes of Mount Dhaulagiri. The experienced Italian climber, Simone La Terra, was inside his tent when an incredibly powerful gust of wind tore it from a narrow, rocky ridge. He and his shelter plunged 800 meters down a sheer cliff face into the abyss. But here's the central mystery. How did his partner, Waldemar, who was halfway inside that same tent, manage to survive, while Simone's trusted safety equipment inexplicably failed? We'll trace the path of this stubborn loner, who for years challenged the highest peaks without oxygen, to understand how he ended up on that fateful ledge. Picture Castel Goffredo, a quiet, sun-drenched town on the flat plains of northern Italy. There are no sheer cliffs or harsh glaciers here, just calm fields and the steady rhythm of European life. It was here, on May 7, 1981, that Simone La Terra was born. Until the age of 24, his life story seems completely ordinary. None of his neighbors or acquaintances could have ever guessed that this smiling guy from the warmth of Lombardy would one day trade the comforts of home for the piercing cold of the death zone. We know little about his youth, but we know the exact turning point when everything changed forever. The year is 2005. While his peers are building conventional careers in offices, Simone makes a radical decision that splits his life into before and after. He packs his gear, travels to the other side of the planet to the Himalayas, and immediately, without years of training on smaller peaks, he throws down a challenge to a snow-covered giant, the 8,201-meter-high Cho Oyu. And this is where the first puzzle appears. Where did a 24-year-old from a small town get the money for an expedition that costs a fortune? To this day, there's no answer. Simone doesn't just attempt an 8,000er with no experience. He chooses the toughest, so-called pure style. What does that mean in practice? Imagine stepping out into space without a tether or an air supply. The Italian flatly refuses to use bottled oxygen. He doesn't pay local Sherpa guides, who typically set the routes, haul heavy tents, and cook for commercial tourists. Simone decides to go alone, just him, a heavy backpack, and endless snow. Step by step, he gains altitude. The air becomes critically thin. Every movement burns his lungs. But the mountain quickly puts the newcomer in his place. The weather turns abruptly, and a powerful storm rolls in. A lack of technical experience and the fury of the elements force Simone to admit defeat and turn back. This failure doesn't break his spirit. On the contrary, it becomes fuel for more training. Just 1 year passes. It's 2006. Simone chooses a new target, and its name alone is enough to take the breath away from many seasoned climbers. Nanga Parbat, the Diamir Face, one of the most brutal and forbidding places on the entire planet. This time, he goes alone again. It's a pure solo ascent in strict alpine style. No pre-fixed ropes, no intermediate high-altitude camps stocked with food and gas. He carries his entire meager existence on his own back. Days blur into an endless struggle against snow, ice, and vertical rock. Simone stubbornly pushes higher and higher up the face. 7,000 meters, 7,200. Finally, he reaches the incredible mark of 7,500 meters. The summit seems so close, but nature has other plans. The sky above Nanga Parbat suddenly turns black. A massive high-altitude storm begins to rage. Visibility instantly drops to zero. Hurricane-force winds try to rip the lone man from the exposed rock face. The temperature plummets to critical levels. Time starts working against the climber. Every minute of delay at this altitude drains the last of his strength and warmth. Simone has only one real choice. He retreats once more to survive, mustering his willpower for the long, grueling descent through the blizzard back to the safety of base camp. Autumn 2006. Now, the 25-year-old climber is sitting in a cramped tent at the foot of Shishapangma. It's the lowest of the 8,000ers, but it brutally punishes any mistake. Imagine living inside a small freezer while the wind howls relentlessly outside. Journalists in warm studios usually call these periods by the boring term, acclimatization. But for the person on the mountain, it's a grueling psychological battle. An entire month of tents waiting for the right weather passes. Food supplies are dwindling fast. Neighboring expeditions lose their patience, pack up their camps, and head down. Winter is closing in quickly. Time is working against the lone climber. It's a classic countdown, with the success of the entire venture on the line. Finally, the sky above the summit clears, a short weather window opens, and the final push begins. 13 hours of non-stop physical work at the absolute limit. The air at this altitude is so thin that every breath feels like trying to breathe through a thin plastic straw while sprinting. And again, the climber sticks to his strict rules. He carries no heavy oxygen canisters. He uses no local porters to carry his gear. Observers in the lower camps watch through powerful binoculars. All they see is a tiny dot, stubbornly crawling up the vast white slope. This image shatters the conventional mold of large-scale Himalayan expeditions. The dot moves slowly, but surely upward. It's October 9th. The clock is ticking mercilessly. The short daylight hours are coming to an end. And then he takes the final step, the summit. His first 8,000er is successfully climbed. 8,027 meters are now beneath his feet. Months of training and incredible stubbornness have paid off. This success instantly changes his status back home. That same year, his achievements are recognized. He wins the prestigious national Carlo Mari Award. The professional jury praises not just the ascent itself, but the crystal-clear style in which it was done. A man, without any outside help, proves to society what he is capable of. July 12, 2007. Sports reporters are hastily typing up their stories. The young Italian is standing on the summit of Broad Peak. 8,047 meters are behind him. It seems like the perfect end to the season, time to pack up and fly home. A second 8,000er is in the bag. But this is just a diversion. The main goal is waiting nearby, its black rocky profile a terrifying sight. Simone gives himself absolutely no time to recover. His muscles are still screaming from the extreme exertion, yet he's already walking toward the base of K2. Onlookers at base camp watch with concern. This is the most savage mountain in the Karakoram range. This time, the Italian is roped up with the experienced Marco Tessuti. A partner provides a tactical advantage, but the weather dictates entirely different terms. An invisible timer starts. They struggle through dense fern, compacted snow as hard as old concrete. An altitude of 7,500 meters. The air is critically thin. And then, the mountain springs its trap. The sky collapses into a thick white wall. Visibility is wiped out completely. To continue upward in these conditions is a one-way ticket to nowhere. Any rescue expert would confirm. They make the only right move. The climbers turn around and retreat. Just a few months pass. The harsh winter of 2007 and 2008 arrives. Most professional climbers are sitting in their warm homes, drawing summer routes on maps. Simone returns to Pakistan. Before him, once again rises the familiar wall of Nanga Parbat, which had already forced him to turn back. Now, the rules of the game are 10 times harder. Winter mountains are a completely different planet. Local meteorologists look at the forecasts in horror. The temperature plummets far below -40. This time, he's joined by a tough local guy, Meherban, known to everyone as Karim. The pair enters a fierce battle with the frost. The ice on the slope is as hard as bulletproof glass. The steel points of their crampons clang and bounce off the surface. Meter by meter, they crawl to the 6,000-meter mark. Above that, the real test of endurance begins. The slope turns into a giant wind tunnel. A ferocious wind blasts away any remaining warmth from under their down jackets. Their bodies send alarm signals. Reserves are at zero. The extreme cold brings their attempt to an abrupt end. The expedition is called off, and the pair descends. Summer, 2008. The Karakoram once again greets its visitors with a harsh disposition. Simone arrives at the Gasherbrum Massif. His first target is Gasherbrum 1, the hidden peak. He makes a push for the summit, but the mountain puts up a solid wall of defense. Snow squalls hit him straight in the face, forcing a retreat. The season is slipping away, the days growing shorter. A normal person would pack their bags and fly home after that. But Simone simply turns his head. Right next door, a perfect snow pyramid rises into the sky, Gasherbrum 2. There's a myth among commercial guides that it's the easiest 8,000er in the region, a real trap for newcomers. At 8,000 meters, there are no easy routes. The weather deteriorates rapidly, turning the mountain into a giant trap of snow and ice. Eyewitnesses in neighboring camps are hastily packing their duffel bags. The radio channels are filled with messages about evacuations. The leaders of large groups choose the only safe option: get down before it's too late. The base camp quickly empties. The slope becomes completely deserted. Only 2 tiny dots remain on the route: Simone and a strong Polish climber, Paweł Michalski. They make a decision that many below would call pure recklessness. They stay, alone with the mountain, no support from below, no pre-broken trails from other teams. Ahead, there is only deep, untouched snow. The ascent feels like wading chest-deep through an icy swamp. Every single move drains what little energy they have left. The satellite forecast gives them a tiny weather window. They have just one chance. A huge, invisible clock is ticking, counting down the short minutes of relative calm. They begin the final push. They work in perfect sync, taking turns breaking a deep trench through the fresh snow. It's heavy, exhausting, monotonous work at the very limit of human endurance. Then comes July 31st. The air becomes crystal clear and incredibly sharp. The last few meters are especially tough. And then, the steep slope suddenly ends. Ahead, there's nothing but empty sky. The pair has successfully reached the summit. This impressive success makes Gasherbrum 2 the third 8,000er in the Italian climber's career. They stand on the peak, completely alone. All around them, the endless ridges of the Karakoram stretch out, bound in eternal ice. The temperature plummets, a harsh reminder that they need to get back to camp, and fast. The success in the Karakoram is now in the past, and Simone moves his camp to Nepal, to the Lhotse Massif. This is the 4th highest peak on the planet, the formidable neighbor of Everest. The Italian stays true to his strict principles. Once again, he chooses a pure solo route. No supplemental oxygen on his back, no partners. Just one man on a gigantic wall of ice. Down below, guides from neighboring teams occasionally glance up through powerful binoculars. They see a tiny figure, confidently gaining altitude. The weather is stable, the terrain seems predictable. It creates the perfect illusion of another successful expedition ahead. But nature is preparing a blow from where it's least expected. Simone crosses an invisible line, an altitude of 7,900 meters. This is deep inside the death zone, where the cells of the human body are physically unable to regenerate. Suddenly, the steady rhythm of the ascent is shattered. The climber feels a heavy pressure in his chest. At first, he blames it on sheer exhaustion and the icy wind. Shortness of breath is a normal state in such an extreme environment. This false assumption makes him take a few more steps upward, but the situation spirals out of control. His breathing becomes ragged. A terrifying wet rattle starts deep in his chest. Any high-altitude medicine specialist would recognize this symptom instantly. High-altitude pulmonary edema is setting in. To put it as simply as possible, due to the critically low atmospheric pressure, fluid begins to rapidly leak into the airways. The person is literally drowning from the inside, in the middle of a dry, frozen wasteland. Suddenly, every single minute counts. With each passing moment, his condition deteriorates rapidly. An observer in a nearby base camp knows the statistics for cases like this. A solo climber at almost 8,000 meters with this diagnosis is doomed. Organizing a rescue operation is impossible. Helicopters are useless at these altitudes. There is absolutely no help to wait for. All sporting ambition turns to dust. Simone makes the decision to turn back immediately. He instantly aborts the summit push, just a couple of 100 meters from his goal. A brutal test of endurance begins. Every step down is an incredible struggle. His lungs refuse to work properly. His consciousness teeters on the fine edge of blacking out. He forces himself to move down the steep slope, relying only on his survival instinct and muscle memory. It's an agonizing, endlessly long descent in complete solitude. Simone mobilizes all his hidden reserves and, inch by inch, sheds the life-saving altitude. He does the incredible. The lone climber makes it to a safe zone entirely on his own, snatching his life back from the unforgiving mountain. Fall of 2009 arrives. His body has fully recovered from the severe breakdown on the last mountain. Simone returns to the Himalayas and once again sets his sights on the Cho Oyu Massif. He joins a strong Spanish team. In their articles, sports reporters dub it the Himalayan Sprint. Usually, expeditions like this stretch on for weeks. People set up intermediate camps, slowly haul heavy gear, and spend a long time acclimatizing to the thin air. But this group shatters all the usual timelines. They work like a single, well-oiled machine. A mere 13 days after their first step into base camp, Simone is already standing on the summit. The mountain yields with astonishing speed. The year 2010 begins with a new, ambitious goal: the Mountain Manaslu. Local guides look anxiously at its sheer slopes. The snow this season is settling in a completely unpredictable way. Giant, unstable slabs form, ready to break loose at the slightest sound. The climber stubbornly pushes upward. He reaches the mark of 7,500 meters. Suddenly, a very low, vibrating rumble echoes from deep beneath his feet. The slope tenses. Eyewitnesses in the lower camp freeze by their radios, expecting the worst. The avalanche danger instantly hits a critical red level. To continue the push would be to walk willingly into a trap. Simone turns around and immediately retreats to a safe zone. However, the season isn't over yet. Simone makes a sharp tactical move and shifts his focus back to Pakistan. The familiar Nanga Parbat is waiting for him again. This time, he's working on the wall with a trusted Polish partner, Paweł Michalski. The mountain greets the pair with an abnormally thick fog. Visibility drops to almost zero. Imagine trying to find your way out of a massive room, completely filled with thick white smoke, while the icy floor beneath you is tilted at a 60-degree angle. The pair moves forward almost blindly. Navigating this kind of terrain without visual cues is a constant source of stress. Every minute, they risk stepping onto a fragile cornice. The timer on the short daylight hours mercilessly counts down. But it's in these extremely tense conditions that they make an unexpected move. They leave the classic trail and forge an entirely new route. Through the thick shroud of bad weather, the pair breaks through to the north summit. Their altimeters register a new victorious mark, approximately 8,050 meters. Now, Simone is back at Manaslu's base camp in the fall of 2011. Sports journalists are placing bets. Will he risk it again, or will he retreat at the first sign of danger? The mountain looks deceptively calm. Experienced high-altitude guides know its extremely treacherous nature all too well. Last season, the unstable snowpack forced the Italian to turn back just short of his goal. Now, he's here again, fully prepared for a tough rematch. Meteorologists send alarming reports via satellite. The window of good weather is slamming shut right before their eyes. An invisible countdown begins. The climber has only a few days to get through the most dangerous zone before the destructive autumn storms hit. He begins the steep ascent. The snow under his heavy boots is very dense. Each step echoes with a dull thud in the absolute silence. Observers from the lower camps watch the lone, dark figure tensely. One tiny wrong move on this terrain could instantly trigger a fatal collapse. But Simone moves like a finely tuned machine. It's October 4th. The air is practically ringing from the intense cold. A harsh, icy wind tries to rip him from the wall, but he stubbornly clings to microscopic ledges. The last few dozen meters are agonizingly difficult. The severe lack of oxygen squeezes every last drop of strength from his muscles. And then, the steep slope finally levels out. This is the main summit of Manaslu. The Italian takes a deep breath of the freezing air. The fifth 8,000er is now officially on his personal record. Experts who analyze Himalayan incidents often point out one important detail. The euphoria from a major success can often dull a climber's basic sense of danger. The year is 2012. Simone makes a completely unexpected move. He abandons his usual solo style and joins a large international expedition. Their main target is K2, the same ferocious peak that had already forced him to retreat once before. Base camp is like a massive, agitated beehive. Dozens of strong people, tons of expensive equipment, and constant radio chatter. But the massive mountain seems to mock their grandiose human plans. The weather breaks, completely and irrevocably. A hurricane-force wind shreds the thick safety ropes to pieces. There are simply no official records of the exact altitude Simone managed to reach this time. Sports reporters write just one thing in their dry summaries. The expedition ends in complete failure. A huge international machine of experienced professionals runs into a solid, invisible wall. That challenging season, the Black Pyramid of K2 remains unconquered by anyone. The mountain makes it clear, human rules and large-scale team ambitions don't apply here. Simone descends to base camp once again, his life intact. 2013. After the disappointment of being part of a huge, unwieldy team, Simone returns to his proven, fast-paced format. He once again joins forces with his old partner, Pavel Michalski. Their new target is Dhaulagiri 1, often called the White Mountain. They start their summit push, relying strictly on the power of their own lungs. No supplemental oxygen. The altitude makes breathing extremely difficult. Every step requires an insane level of physical concentration and precise control over the body. Meanwhile, independent high-altitude meteorologists are sounding the alarm, studying the latest satellite images in detail. A gigantic atmospheric vortex is forming above the massif. The speed of the cold air masses is beginning to increase exponentially. An invisible timer starts to tick. The pair has just hours left to finish the job and get back to a safe zone. The climbers push relentlessly up the snowy summit dome. The steep terrain gradually begins to level out. Their navigation devices clearly register the mark, 8,100 meters above sea level. All that's left to the absolute summit is that one insignificant number, 67 vertical meters. Visually, it seems like you could just reach out and touch the final point. It's a classic trick of perspective at high altitude. The mountain lures people onto its most exposed section, just to deliver its crushing blow. And right then, Dhaulagiri reveals its true nature. A brutal, squalling wind suddenly slams into them, with the kinetic energy of a speeding freight train. Hard snow and shards of ice fly parallel to the ground, completely blinding the climbers. Later, when specialists analyzed the track from their electronic transmitters, the picture was terrifying. On their monitors, the straight line of their ascent begins to jump erratically from side to side. In the roaring blizzard, Simone and Pavel completely lose their bearings. Visibility instantly drops to the length of an outstretched arm. The line of the safe route vanishes without a trace. All around them is just a pulsating white chaos. It's impossible to know where to place your next step. Moving a meter to the right or left now means plunging into a bottomless abyss. To continue by feel in a situation like this would be an almost certain fall. The psychological pressure reaches its peak. They are just a few dozen steps away from their coveted victory. Everything inside them is screaming to push forward, no matter what. But the pure instinct for survival overpowers their athletic ambition. The Italian and the Pole turn around, right on the threshold of success. Just a few meters from their cherished goal, they take the hardest but most life-saving step. The pair begins an emergency descent, fleeing the epicenter of the raging hurricane. 5 whole years pass after that dramatic moment when the hurricane threw the climber back. Between 2014 and 2017, Simone takes part in completely different expeditions. He's constantly training on various massifs, working on difficult terrain, but an invisible weight is still dragging him down. It's as if Dhaulagiri is stuck in his memory like a sharp splinter. Then comes the spring of 2018. The 36-year-old Italian athlete packs his gear and flies to Nepal once again. He is returning solely to settle a personal score. The head of a large commercial group, Prestige Adventure, Catalina Casada, carefully reviews the final participant lists for the season. A rather motley crew of exactly 15 people is gathering at base camp. Accident analysts always point out the peculiarities of such large groups. They're mostly wealthy clients who pay generously for maximum comfort, ropes fixed by guides, and hot meals served on a strict schedule. And suddenly, among this crowd, the experienced Italian appears. It's the perfect smokescreen for any outside observer. Many reporters jump to the wrong conclusion. It seems the stubborn loner has finally grown tired and decided to take the easy, guaranteed path, surrounded by a huge support team. Journalists are already mentally drafting boring articles about the independent athlete's shift in priorities. But the reality is completely different. Simone is simply using the commercial camp's infrastructure as a convenient and safe launch pad. The local high-altitude workers whisper in surprise by their tents when they see his unpacked duffel bag. It's completely empty. Not a single heavy metal cylinder for breathing. While the other 14 people meticulously check their masks, regulators, and hoses before heading into the extreme altitude zone, La Terra stands firm. He is strictly preserving his signature style. He will go up using only his own lungs, without a single gram of supplemental oxygen. Forecasters in warm offices down on the plains begin to anxiously check the latest weather maps. The spring this year is proving to be abnormally fickle, with the atmospheric front constantly shifting. A relentless countdown begins. Every hour of delay in such a large, slow-moving group critically increases the risks for the one man climbing without artificial support. The Italian needs to move at his own, incredibly fast pace, while the commercial clients trudge slowly and heavily up the snowy slope. He knows this treacherous route perfectly, remembering every crevasse up to the 8,100-meter mark. Only one task remains ahead: to close that final section that stopped him last time. The morning of April 28, 2018, arrives. Simone and a strong Polish climber, Waldemar Kowalewski, are heading up another slope. It's a routine process that professionals call acclimatization. The human body must be gradually conditioned to the severe lack of oxygen in the air, much like a deep-sea diver adjusting to the immense pressure of the ocean. Mountain incident analysts always study the timeline of days like these very closely. The morning is quite clear. The clock shows around 1100 hours. The pair steadily makes its way to an extremely awkward and difficult section of the route. It's a steep, icy, rocky ridge. Navigation devices and altimeters record the exact figure, 6,976 meters above sea level. They are very close to the spot where expeditions usually set up High Camp 3. The weather is holding steady for now. The bright sun illuminates the slope, and nothing suggests any sudden changes. It creates a false sense of being in complete control of the situation. It seems everything is going exactly according to plan, but the terrain itself, at this very point, is a treacherous natural trap. Simone decides to stop right there. He needs to pitch a small tent on a tiny, narrow, and practically vertical patch of ground. There's just enough free space on the ledge for one person with a heavy pack on their back. The surface underfoot is covered in very smooth, hard snow, so any object not securely fastened will instantly slide and fly far down below. The Italian follows standard procedure. He takes the metal carabiner on his harness, a special durable belt made of thick nylon straps, and clips himself into the fixed guide rope. This rope was securely anchored to the slope by previous groups, and serves as the only lifeline above a massive drop. The sharp click of the safety mechanism echoes in the thin, empty air. Visually, this action gives a 100% feeling of security. The athlete is firmly attached to the mountain. At this very moment, the climbers' paths diverge. Waldemar quickly assesses his current physical condition. He needs to gain a little more altitude up the slope so his lungs can better adapt to the extreme environment. The Pole announces his plan, leaves his partner on this tiny ledge, and continues to slowly ascend the vertical snowpath. Simone is left completely alone on the exposed wall. He begins the complex and painstaking process of setting up his temporary shelter, unfurling the dense, stiff fabric in the piercing wind. With only a narrow strip of rock underfoot and a bottomless open space all around, is a task that demands surgical precision and immense patience. He has to work in very thick gloves, his fingers don't obey him well, and his movements are severely restricted. One of the climber's hands must constantly control the tension on his safety line. The invisible clock begins to count down the short minutes. The man is completely absorbed in the hard manual labor, focused on the details of the tent, while the gigantic mountain massif behind him remains utterly silent. The crackle of a portable radio suddenly shatters the sleepy silence of base camp. The time is exactly 1300 hours on April 28th. Down below, in the relative safety of the large tents, the Italian's old partner, Pavel Michalski, and a Romanian climber, Alex Gavan, are sitting by the receiver. They listen intently to the noisy broadcast. A familiar voice breaks through the heavy static and the howling wind. Simone is making his scheduled radio call from his tiny rock ledge. Mountain rescue specialists always teach you to pay attention, not so much to the words themselves, but to the speaker's intonation. Gavin frowns tensely, listening to the speaker. The voice on the other end of the invisible line sounds frighteningly exhausted. Every word is a huge physical effort for the lone man. The short phrases are constantly interrupted by a heavy, hollow cough. At an altitude of almost 7 kilometers, that sound is like a blaring alarm on a sinking submarine. The Italian's body is working at its absolute limit, rapidly burning through its last meager energy reserves, like a car engine started with no oil at all. But the athlete stubbornly tries to maintain his usual professional tone. Michalski, as an incredibly experienced high-altitude climber, immediately asks the most important technical question into the microphone. He wants to know exactly how the safety anchor is set up on such steep terrain. Simone confirms that his safety line is connected to the fixed rope, but clarifies that while setting up the tent, he has loosened the tension on the system to move more freely. The carabiner remains clipped into the fixed rope, but at that moment, the system is partially unweighted and not under its working tension. For the people below, this information sounds reassuring. Technically, the safety is engaged, but a partially unweighted system no longer guarantees full protection in the event of a sudden jolt. It seems that the main threat has been neutralized. The tension inside the communications tent finally breaks. What follows is just a normal, friendly chat between comrades. Down at base camp, they start to poke fun at his incredibly risky choice for a campsite. They vividly imagine Simone up there, trying to keep his balance on an icy stone ledge no wider than an ordinary kitchen table. In these harsh conditions, laughter and a bit of humor are a basic defense mechanism for the human mind. But none of them have any idea that this narrow platform has already become a trap. The radio call ends on a positive note. The radio clicks dryly and falls silent for good. The ticking of an invisible clock grows louder as the man on the wind-blasted slope is left completely alone. April 28th continues its relentless countdown. While the people below calmly sip hot tea, a full-blown climate catastrophe is unfolding up above. By this point, Waldemar Kowalewski has managed to gain some serious altitude. His altimeter reads 7,200 meters. The Polish climber plans to set up his own high-altitude camp for the night, to let his body acclimatize to the thin air. But the atmosphere changes in an instant. A violent storm wind delivers a crushing blow to the upper slopes of Dhaulagiri. The speed of the air currents turns the fine snow into harsh sandpaper. Waldemar pulls out his tent, trying to rig up at least some minimal shelter from the blizzard. But the hurricane gives him zero chance. A powerful gust, with a deafening crack, shatters the sturdy frame poles as if they were dry spaghetti. The fabric flaps helplessly in the wind. Pitching a tent without a rigid frame is physically impossible. Investigators and experts know this. Losing your shelter in a zone like this is like starting a stopwatch. The climber has literally minutes before the frostbite sets in, with serious consequences. The temperature is dropping so fast it takes his breath away. Waldemar decides to start descending immediately. He clips onto the fixed ropes and slides heavily downward through the raging white haze. The horizon has completely vanished into the whiteout. The descent becomes a raw, instinctive fight for survival. The metal carabiner struggles to move along the frozen rope. Every meter is gained with incredible effort, while the wind tries to tear him from the sheer face of the mountain. Finally, through the dense curtain of snow, a familiar rocky ledge appears, the 6,976-meter mark. His Italian partner's tent is still holding on to the narrow stone outcrop. Waldemar reaches it, completely exhausted. The entrance is already buried under fresh snow, piled up by the storm over several hours. There is critically little space on the ledge. The Polish climber desperately digs at the frozen zipper. He crawls halfway into the cramped shelter to escape the icy hurricane, catch his ragged breath, and clear the entrance. The roar of the hurricane outside is so intense, it sounds like the continuous howl of a heavy jetliner taking off. The two experienced climbers have to shout just to hear fragments of each other's sentences over the deafening chaos of the raging storm. Specialists who analyze mountaineering incidents study cases like this in detail. They explain that rocky ridges often act like natural wind tunnels. Because of the sharp terrain, air masses can suddenly accelerate to unbelievable speeds, focusing all their kinetic energy on a single point. This is exactly what's happening at the 6,976-meter mark. An extremely powerful, abnormally strong gust of wind slams directly into the exposed slope. The Italian's tiny tent takes the full force of this monstrous impact. Because the entrance is partially open where Waldemar is stuck, a super-dense stream of cold air instantly rushes inside. The thin synthetic fabric immediately inflates with incredible force, like a giant ship's sail in a brutal ocean storm. The physics of this process are brutally simple and utterly merciless. The immense lifting force far exceeds the strength of any anchor. What happens next unfolds in the space of a single heartbeat. The tent is ripped from the narrow ledge. In that instant, Simone's safety system is pulled out of its working position, and he's pulled down the slope along with the torn-away shelter. The Polish climber, securely clipped to the thick outer rope with his metal carabiner, can only watch in a state of shock. The sole eyewitness to this catastrophe is completely powerless to do anything. The elements act too fast. Through the continuous howl of the blizzard, Waldemar clearly hears his partner's last desperate words, a short phrase echoing over and over. No, no, no. The human voice quickly dissolves into the icy void of the massive mountain. The trajectory of the fall is down a nearly vertical, smooth slope. 800 vertical meters down. That's nearly a kilometer of open space beneath his feet. The man, along with the scraps of light fabric, plummets into a bottomless gorge. The fall is swift, ending at the base of the slope, leaving the stunned witness hanging from his lonely safety line in the middle of the white chaos. Waldemar Kowalewski is now all alone at an altitude of almost 7,000 meters. A storm is raging around him. The Polish climber miraculously holds on to the steep slope because, at the very last second, he managed to clip into the outer fixed rope. This thin nylon thread takes the full impact of the storm and the man's weight, preventing him from being swept away after his partner. Why did a similar safety system fail Simone inside the tent as it was torn away? This question immediately becomes one of the key technical mysteries. It's impossible to reconstruct the exact sequence of events at the moment of the pull, so the final configuration of his safety gear remains a subject of technical debate. Maybe the tent material itself ripped, maybe the anchor knot failed, or maybe the carabiner was forced open by the monstrous jolt. There are no answers. The tent simply vanishes into the blizzard, leaving the eyewitness alone with the hurricane. There's no time to think. The temperature is plummeting, and standing still in the extreme altitude zone means freezing to death in minutes. For Waldemar, there's only one option: keep moving down at any cost. Step by step, he pushes through the white curtain. Visibility is zero. The wind knocks him off his feet, blasting his face with hard, icy pellets. This journey down becomes a grueling 6-hour marathon at the very limit of human endurance. The descent turns into a mechanical struggle for every step. Oxygen deprivation muddles his thoughts, but the instinct for self-preservation keeps pushing the climber forward. After 6 hours of non-stop descent, the life-saving outlines of Camp 2 emerge through the roar of the storm. The altitude, 6,400 meters. This is where the Spanish team's shelters are located. Imagine the scene through the Spaniards' eyes. It's night, a hurricane is violently tearing at their tents, and suddenly, an utterly exhausted figure, covered in a thick layer of frost, appears from the outside. Waldemar practically collapses into their tent. He's breathing heavily and, through the noise of the wind, delivers the terrible news about the Italian's fall. The information hangs like a heavy weight in the cold air. That night, there's nothing more anyone can do. The mountain is completely sealed off by the weather. Going outside is just too dangerous. They warm the eyewitness and help him recover. The morning of April 29th arrives. The wind subsides slightly, giving them a short window for communication. The Spanish climbers take out a portable radio and tune it to base camp's frequency. The transmit button is pressed. Through the static, a short, stark message about the incident on the ridge flies down into the valley. The camp falls silent as they receive the signal. The search and rescue operation is set in motion. At Dhaulagiri base camp, the clock is now ticking in minutes. Alex Gavan and Paweł Michalski, close friends of Simone and extremely experienced high-altitude climbers, understand the physics of the situation all too well. At such an extreme altitude, a person without shelter fades just like a battery in the freezing cold. The climbers urgently contact dispatchers in Kathmandu and demand an evacuation helicopter. At the same time, the alarming signal travels thousands of kilometers, hitting Italy. Here, the perspective shifts dramatically. Paola, Simone's wife, takes on the heaviest emotional burden. From the safety of her home, she turns her living room into a command center. She makes non-stop calls to embassies, puts pressure on insurance companies, and coordinates with Nepalese agencies via satellite phone. A chilling contrast emerges, a warm, safe office in Europe versus an icy storm on the other side of the planet. Paola is doing everything humanly possible on her end, but she can't part the clouds over the Himalayas. And right now, the clouds are the main enemy. The calendar reads April 29th. The rescue helicopter sits alone on a concrete pad in the Nepalese capital. Its blades are still. The pilots stare grimly at the weather reports. Zero visibility, heavy cloud cover, and the hurricane at high altitude is still raging. A flight is physically impossible. Every minute of delay lowers the chances of a successful rescue. It's as if the mountain has slammed a steel trap shut and is letting no one onto its slopes. The people below can only wait. It's not until the morning of April 30th that nature provides a tiny weather window. The crew immediately lifts the light aircraft into the thin air. The pilot flies the helicopter right up against the sheer white walls. The team scans the terrain, following the presumed trajectory of the fall. Suddenly, through the cockpit glass, a technician spots an unnatural dot against the endless field of snow. It's at the 6,100-meter mark. Simone is lying on a steep slope, far from the classic route. Landing the helicopter on such an incline is impossible. The machine would inevitably crash. The rescuers use a sling evacuation method, employing a long external rope with a harness system. It's like precision jewelry work from the sky. The helicopter hangs in the air, directly over the slope, battling fierce gusts of wind. Like a dragonfly poised over a churning stream. A rescuer descends on a line. He has to secure the body, and fast. The slightest mistake from the pilot up above could mean a second disaster. This delicate aerial maneuver is a success. The pilots lift the body on the sling and set a course for Kathmandu, leaving Dhaulagiri behind forever. Later, investigators and experts would close the case. The official cause of the tragedy: a sheer force of nature. Extreme winds had simply ripped the tent away. The investigation revealed no evidence of foul play, or any miscalculations in how the climb was organized. It's just nature's way of reminding us who's really in charge up here.